Hi, I've been a Genshin Impact player for a long time. Since the launch of this game, I have a lot of characters, and I can say with relative certainty that Dendro ruined the game, or at least ruined it for a large amount of people. Dendro is a good element in theory. People waited a long time for it, and I think the reactions it has are quite nice. I think the fact that you have different variations, Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, all of these in one and contained within one element do work really well. The fact that it doesn't necessarily work with Cryo, or Animo, or Geo, especially Geo, is a missed opportunity, especially given Geo needs some reactions. But outside of that, the problem with Dendro lies not necessarily with what it can do, but the low investment, high value it has, and the fact that, comparatively speaking, the amount of time you have to spend getting a Dendro character up is so much lower than you would have to spend getting a Animal character up, or a DPS up, a standard DPS that is. Even characters who are meant to specifically work with Dendro, such as Nilo here, or Tignari, or Sino, get so much more value in comparison to any other character. Hypothetically speaking, let's say you're using a Yoimiya or a Hu Tao. Either one of these really wants to vaporize, so somebody like Yelan or Xingqiu would do wonders for them. But comparatively speaking, the amount of value and damage these two as a combo can do is going to be less than the amount of damage somebody like a Miko with a Nahida can do, or Nahida with a Nilo can do. And I'm using these two as comparisons because these are two individuals who work really well together. And I think that the problem with Dendro lies in that it is so easy to get up and running, to get geared up. Stack EM. Hey, you have one in Kale. You got it for free. What do you want to do? Give it Favonius Warbro. That's free. Stack EM on her, that's fine. Stack Deepwood, that's a good set overall because it reduces Dendro resistance specifically, which is wonderful for Dendro reactions. Hey, if there's one character you want, how about this? Just get the Archon. Go for Constellations on the Archon. Ignoring Constellations, ignoring all of that, Dendro is so easy to get built up, it honestly feels unfair by comparison. If we're looking at other characters, if we're looking at other units who are coming up, next is Linné in Fontaine. He is a Pyro character. Pyro doesn't really have the best interactions with Dendro, and considering he wants to be running mono Pyro, he's even less valuable comparatively. If you're looking at other characters, who gains the most value? It's either going to be Electro units, even Raiden got a boost from Dendro, or Hydro units. And because of that, it's very difficult, and it feels, or at least eliminates a lot of the motivation people have to build up characters. I legitimately like my Yoimiya. She's 80, 201. It took me a while to get from 9200 set that I have at Shimenawa's into this Echo set. My Yelan's good, my Raiden's good, my Xiao is good. I have a lot of characters who I built up and invested a lot of time and effort into, especially with Yoimiya, R1, C2, C2 Yelan. But this team has a more difficult time clearing Abyss than a Nilo Bloom team, than a Miko Aggravate team. And I know, yeah, I could be a niche case scenario, but if you're looking at a new player, if you're looking at an older player, the concept is a lot of us have spent so long farming for artifacts, Gone here, 82, 181, with an Amo spell. You spend 1 year, 2 years, a couple months, it doesn't matter, an immense amount of time investing into a character, expecting them to do really well, and then one new element comes out and it completely destroys all of that progress because about a week is all it takes to get a Dendro character geared up, maybe 2 if you're unlucky. And the amount of damage they can provide you with not even necessarily a 5-star, but even just one character of a specific element, it feels really bad. And it removes your motivation for a lot of individuals because why would you spend months building up a perfect character when you could spend a week building up a subpar character and just slide them over with somebody else and have relatively good amounts of damage? On the surface level, that wouldn't be an issue because you could realistically out damage that. You could match that damage with investment. The problem is when you look at Abyss, Abyss is ramped up in difficulty to match the amount of damage Dendro can equal. And a lot of times in scenarios, you have Abyss that is specifically geared to block or deal with Dendro. You're running Bloom teams, guess what? Yeah, I have Rift Hounds. Well, guess what? You can just run a healer like Kokomi. It's great. Down here, use Hyper Bloom. There's already Electro, use Hyper Bloom. It has range. The fact of the matter is, if I'm looking at any of the current elemental reactions we have in the game, compared to Dendro, let's say right now we have Vape. Vape is primarily single target unless you're talking about Xiangling with a Kazuha and a child. That being child specifically, not a random child. You have the primary Vape damage dealers are Yoimiya, Hu Tao, and then Diluc. And as a result of that, that's single target oriented. If we're talking about Overload, nobody uses that because it knocks enemies back. That's 2 reactions off the table. AoE Ganyu's your best example of a cryo AoE, but she's melt. And if you're talking about melt in that sense, yeah, it's good, but you're limited severely on what you can do. Because you either want to run Xiangling and be close, because you don't have enough space for a random flex Anemo if you don't want to get hit. Take that out of the equation, you have Freeze, which is crowd control, which works great with Anemo, which is why Freeze Ganyu was so good, or Freeze Ayaka. Even if we're talking about Electrocharged or Superconduct, those weren't anything near what Dendro has to offer. You want AoE? Use Bloom. Use Super Bloom with Nilo. Hyper Bloom has technical range and AoE. All you need to do is get the blooms out and then use them and they home in. So it doesn't necessarily have the disadvantages of a Melt Ganyu's range limitations and can still be single target. So you're not losing anything out. In Melt Ganyu, if you run her against a singular boss, yes, you have the chance of hitting them more, especially with Xiangling, but you're not getting the benefit or any benefit in that sense. In this instance, run Hyper Bloom. It is legitimately useful in basically every circumstance, and because you have that initial range around you, that initial field, which in this instance, let's say hypothetically, it is a Zhongli pillar away, that is your range with Ganyu and Xiangling. With a Hyper Bloom, that will auto-target. Good luck escaping it. And so, you're talking about that. You throw in Miko, or Fischl, or Raiden Shogun, or Kuki Shinobu, and you have aggravates. You throw in Nilo and you have blooms, or super blooms, or versions, and it becomes very difficult for a lot of individuals to justify something like getting a Wanderer or a Kokomi. Because if you're not running them in a Dendro-oriented team, the problem is, yes, they're fun. Yes, you could legitimately love and enjoy them. But Dendro shouldn't be the only method, or one of, if not the only method, that it feels like being capable of clearing Abyss. If you're a newer player, and you get Scaramouche, or you get Lene, or you get Yelan, your best teams are going to be Dendro-oriented, which is, okay, fine, great. The problem comes then when you try to build out other units who aren't correlated with Dendro, a Geo unit like Ito, or an Anemo unit like Xiao, or a Pyro DPS, or a Cryo DPS. And you run into the problem that each and every one of these units feels lackluster in comparison to running a Dendro team, or you don't get nearly as good clear times. Higher investment should equal better yield. The more time you put into a character should equal the better value you get out of that character. If you've invested months and months into perfecting your Yai, perfecting your Ganyu, your Raiden, your Miko, or your Mia, you should really feel like you're getting significant value from that character. I should be able to take my Yoimiya into Abyss pretty easily. But when you look at that and you say, I could farm 6 months here and get this character, the weapon or constellations, or get this character and the best supports, or I could spend half that time and get this character and the best support and do equal or more damage, that begins to feel bad. Dendro, in my opinion, ruined the mindset that a lot of people had when it came to Genshin, which was pull for who you want and take your best characters into the Abyss. Because pulling for who you want meant you'd oftentimes build whoever you wanted as your best character, and you take them into Abyss. But once 3.0 launched, we saw a dramatic increase in the amount of damage enemies did in the Abyss to compensate for your amount of damage. And that meant that a lot of characters were left behind. And it became so Dendro-oriented that it kind of sucks now. I mean, consider the fact that basically most of your teams that are significantly reliant on one type of reaction are mitigated or in some ways eliminated by one boss that requires Electro, basically. These want AoE. Well, Bloomworks, you have big nukes like Eula and maybe Raiden, or even Yoimiya. So there are advantages here, but you want Electro here. And guess what benefits a lot from having Electro? Hyper Bloom, Aggravates, all of those reactions. And because of the versatility of this, it makes it very difficult to justify running anything that isn't Dendro. And I think, in my opinion at least, it makes it incredibly difficult to tell somebody else, hey, pull for who you want. Because if you want to clear the hardest content, it's not pull for who you want, it's pull for a Dendro character. And then pull for another character who works well with Dendro. Because everyone else pales in comparison. If you want to match Dendro, and you have already maxed out your character in terms of artifacts, you're left with the weapon consideration or constellation consideration. And that's never a good feeling. Because if you put that same amount of consideration into the weapons, into the cons, as you would with another character that's correlated with Dendro, that's already having a high baseline, you get much more value. Nahida as a unit can buff up other characters. Nahida as a unit has Raiden and Yamiko's C6 as a C2 that benefits your whole team, and Nahida as a unit gets crit rate and crit damage based on her elemental mastery. She took, theoretically speaking, what was Kazuha's main benefit and then boosted it up even more, and it sucks. I don't like how strong Dendro is. I think it is unbalanced, severely so. I think that Dendro could have worked fine. It could have been a nice new player's introduction. Hey, Dendro's really good early game, but as you get into late game, you can start gearing out more towards higher level reactions and melts and vape and things like that. But the fact that Dendro can compete so early with such endgame level gear makes it feel a bit too unfair, because Dendro didn't assist the weaker elements. Dendro did assist one weaker element, making it so much stronger than almost all the other elements that it's unfair. And it doesn't feel worthwhile. Yeah, 3.0 shifted the meta, but it flipped it upside down, and not in a good way. It didn't provide you with a bunch of... It provided you with new options, but it didn't necessarily provide you with the ability to use characters who were previously considered bad. Yes, I know Kuki's the exception, people are going to point to her, but let's be honest here. That was clear from the start. It doesn't matter. And that was still a bad decision on HoYo's part, in my opinion, because there's no way you should release a bad character with an update later on that fixes them. No. I'm talking about characters that weren't used before. Klee, an individual who wasn't good back then. Geo units, individuals who aren't used at all. Toma got slightly more value. Xinyan didn't get fixed. I would have much rather Dendro try to bring up these other areas like physical, like Geo, like these lackluster characters, than boosting up characters that were already good, or entirely shifting the meta to where characters that were previously really good got jumped down a bit because they didn't work well with it. Do you like Dendro? How long have you invested, and how much have you invested into not only your Genshin account, into your characters, into the people you have, but also have you tried Dendro? I tried to avoid it, but then I got Sino and I kind of had to try it. Then I got Nilo and I kind of had to get Nahida, and yeah. Either way, for me, 4.0, I'm going to try to ignore Dendro. I want the Hydro Archon to be good on her own and not be good with Dendro specifically, or not be balanced around the fact that Dendro exists. That's my biggest worry for the units upcoming, because I feel like they have to work and keep in mind that Dendro, because it's so strong, will dramatically change the way units are oriented. But that's just my thoughts. Leave yours down below, and I'll see you next time.